Hello friends, Dimitri here. As a tech enthusiast and de facto tech support for my family,
Hello IT, have you tried turning it off and on again?
I often deal with recovering data from broken computers while lecturing about the importance of backups. For a long while, I've been using a NAS for backing up my important files. Then my needs expanded to other things like media servers, smart home control, password manager, and others. The dinky NAS CPU with its pitiful amount of RAM just couldn't handle those things anymore. Today I'd like to show you what I built instead and break down all the costs.
What's
A NAS?
Brussels?
First off, let's talk about what a NAS actually is. Network attached storage is an enclosure for a bunch of hard drives that lets you string them together and allow your other computers to access all of that drive space over your home network. Originally, NAS enclosures came with a very basic built-in processor just to handle network connectivity and file system operations. But then NAS manufacturers figured, hey, as long as we already have a CPU and some memory, why not let it do other things? They kept adding in more features, for example, the ability to run apps like media server or cloud file sync. Over time, they ended up developing their own operating systems designed to manage such apps on their NASs. But those operating systems are not like Windows or Mac OS. Even though the vast majority of them are based on Linux, each one is very proprietary and is usually locked down to prevent users from modifying them or even just installing them on a competitor's NAS. Some manufacturers, Synology, even tried to restrict which hard drives could be used in their NASs. Vendor lock-in at its worst. They were later forced to walk back that restriction after a huge customer backlash. But it's only a matter of time until somebody tries tightening that noose again.
Where do I begin?
Back in 2009, I bought a small 4-bay NAS made by Synology to function primarily as a backup for my critical files like important documents and family photos and videos. It was one of the cheaper options back then at around $400. Within a couple of years, in 2012-ish, I wanted a more powerful processor because I started experimenting with more demanding apps. Unfortunately, CPUs on NASs are not replaceable, and in order to upgrade, I had to sell the NAS and buy a brand new one. Let me tell you, unlike iPhones, these things do not hold their resale value. I was lucky to sell it for $100 and a new NAS was around $400 again. It was fine for another 5 years or so, but then I began to consider upgrading again.
Upgrade? That's an interesting name. Is he Dutch?
This time there were factors other than pure CPU power. First off, I was running out of space.
The final frontier.
4 disks were just not cutting it anymore. The consumer-grade drives at the time were generally around 4 terabytes in size, maxing out at 8, with costs going up exponentially for higher capacity ones. It was far more cost-effective for me to add more drives rather than replacing my low-capacity disks with larger ones.
Very nice, how much?
I was looking at NASs with more drive bays only to get quite a sticker shock. 8-bay ones were $1,500, and 12-bay? Over $2,000. What?
What?
That's only for the empty enclosure, without the hard drives. Are you kidding me? For that kind of money, I could build my own NAS.
With blackjack and hookers.
With much better specs too. There's a catch though. Consumer hardware, stuff that anyone can buy online, would not save me much money. A half-decent PC would end up costing the same $1,500 to $2,000 anyway, and I'd need to find special cases that could hold many hard drives. Besides, those PCs are mostly tailored either towards gamers or office workers, when a NAS workload is very different.
My goodness, what's the procedure? What do we do, people?
The trick is buying used enterprise gear. When large companies upgrade their servers, they get rid of their old ones for pennies on a dollar. There is a very good website with a super helpful community around it, serverbuilds.net. People on there discuss exactly these use cases, repurposing old enterprise-grade hardware to build home servers. Depending on what you want your server to do, they have different guides that you can reference with hardware and software recommendations, and even purchasing advice. Their Discord server is very active also. They help me out with planning the hardware parts of my NAS Killer and even with buying hard drives from reputable resellers. I'll put links in the video description.
What did it cost?
Not as much as you'd think actually. For my specific use case, I needed a system with lots of drive bays for storage. I got super lucky. A local refurbisher had a rack-mountable 24-bay chassis made by a very respectable enterprise-level brand, Supermicro, with lots of included add-ons like a 900-watt power supply, a backplane expander that is able to handle up to 24 discs, and fans. It was on sale for only $100, shipping included. For reference, right now this very same chassis goes for $800 without shipping charges. This case came very bare bones, so I had to spend another $60 for drive caddies and $50 more for CPU coolers. On the CPU side, I didn't need a powerful modern one. Instead, I went with an older processor with lots of cores. Intel Xeon is exactly such CPU architecture. Slower cores, but many of them packed into a single chip. Each CPU has 10 cores with hyper-threading, meaning that each can execute 2 instructions simultaneously for a total of 40 threads. I bought a motherboard that supports 2 Xeon CPUs at the same time, with more memory and expansion slots than a typical home PC of the era. The board cost me $200 and CPUs were $40 each. 144GB of server-grade memory was another $250. A bargain compared to today's RAM prices, right? And that's everything, under $750. Over the years, I added a bunch of bells and whistles to this machine. I upgraded networking with a 10GB card for another $25, with the same kind of cards going both into my Plex server and into my personal workstation for faster link-up speeds between those 3 machines. I bought server rails for $50 and another power supply unit for $40 that is specifically designed to run quietly. For comparison, this is what the original PSU sounds like. Give it a moment. Yeah, no thank you. Speaking of noise, I also replaced the fans behind the drive cage on the back of the computer and on the CPUs themselves with much quieter ones. The rack sits right next to my desk, so I'm willing to let the discs run a little hotter to save on my hearing and my sanity. Also, I added a couple of 2TB solid-state drives at $100 each to function as cache. More on those later. In terms of storage, this server is currently running a hodgepodge of 16 hard disk drives with mismatched capacity for a total of 60 TB. I couldn't tell you the exact cost of those drives because I honestly don't remember. Some lower capacity ones I repurposed from the NAS, others I bought on eBay so long ago that their order history is already gone. These days, solid-state drives, or SSDs for short, pretty much took over the home PC market. Their prices have been steadily declining over the years down to about $100 per terabyte, meaning you can pick up a decent, brand new 2TB SSD for just under $200. SSDs offer very fast read and write speeds, which makes them great for general computing tasks like gaming or office applications. Unfortunately, consumer-grade SSDs have limited write endurance, and they degrade much faster than traditional spinning magnetic disks. Under a heavy write workload, which is normal for a NAS, such an SSD would wear out within a year, while a hard drive could easily last a decade. Don't get me wrong, there are solid-state drives that are much more resilient to wear, but they are way more expensive, and generally used by, you guessed it, big data center for enterprise customers who can afford them. For example, right now, a brand new, top-of-the-line enterprise-grade SSD costs almost $650 for only 1.6 terabytes of storage space. The same size hard drive is a tenth of that at $70. Now, for a big business that needs a rack full of storage, the cost difference between a few hundred of those high-performance SSDs versus a few hundred old spinning Rust hard drives is negligible compared to the speed and performance increase they're getting for that money. But you and me, we don't have bottomless buckets full of investor capital. On a sane budget, we can expect to pay around $35 per terabyte for a brand new hard drive, or $15 to $20 per terabyte for used hard drives. So far, I've been talking about the hard drives found on home PCs with serial ATA connections, also known as SATA. Enterprise servers primarily use a different interface for hard drives called SAS, or Serial Attached SCSI. The SAS and SATA connectors look similar, but they are very different and are not interchangeable. On SATA, the power and data pins are separated by a gap, while on SAS they're separated by notches. The SAS interface offers many advantages over serial ATA, such as faster data speeds, but at a premium cost of equivalent SATA drives. Or at least that's how it used to be. Nowadays, prices of SAS drives fell even lower than that of SATA, to a tune of under $10 per terabyte. That was mostly due to low demand, enterprises switching to solid-state drives, but home PCs can't use SAS drives without installing specialized interface cards and different cables. Today, a used 8TB SAS drive can be had for as little as $80, and even cheaper if you buy several in bulk. We can then turn around and use these savings to buy a SAS controller card for our server with the corresponding data cables. But we may not even need to do that, since a lot of server motherboards come with a SAS controller already built in. Mine did, so using SAS drives was a no-brainer. Here are the two SAS connectors on the motherboard. They're connecting directly to the backplane, which splits the signal out to 24 bays. That's another advantage over a typical NAS. Those can only use the more expensive SATA drives. Now let's talk about the operating system my server is running. If you're knowledgeable enough and have time to tinker, you can install Linux and manage everything manually.
Oh, Ubuntu. You are my favorite Linux-based operating system.
Or if you've ever lived within Microsoft ecosystem, you can install Windows and keep everything familiar.
Windows 7 is much more user-friendly than Windows Vista.
As for myself, I wanted something in the middle. The ease of use of Windows, but without all the spying and tracking. The power of Linux, but without having to recompile my own kernel at every turn. And maybe even a little bit of curated app management of Synology without all of their restrictions.
What the hell is this?
For general NAS use, there are several very good options. The two I was choosing between were TrueNAS and Unraid. There are advantages to both, but at the time what really brought me over to Unraid was the ability to use hard drives of mismatched sizes without sacrificing the storage space like RAID requires.
You care to elaborate?
I was gonna go into this long-winded explanation of RAID and its configurations, but I don't want to bore you to sleep. Let's just say that RAID works best if all of the hard drives in the pool are of exact same size. Unraid does not have the limitation, hence the name.
What's good about it?
Unraid's user interface is simple enough for a Linux beginner like yours truly, but also allows power users to mess with more advanced under-the-hood features. Unraid also has ability to use SSDs as temporary storage to speed up copying of data to it. Data gets written to the SSD first, and then gets offloaded to the slower hard drives on a schedule during idle times. You can also use this pool of SSDs for other things that benefit from fast storage, such as keeping Docker containers and virtual machines there permanently. In my array of 16 drives, I'm sacrificing two of my largest ones to parity, which gives me resiliency against two drives failing at the same time. I configured the cache pool out of both 2TB SSDs I mentioned earlier in a mirror configuration, also giving it more resiliency. No matter how redundant your storage solution is though, it will not protect your data if the server itself is destroyed. A burst pipe flooding the basement, fire, a natural disaster, those are things that no amount of hardware redundancy can guard against. There is a backup strategy called 3-2-1. It says that you should have 3 copies of your data on 2 different mediums, one of them being offsite. A NAS or equivalent server only satisfies the number 2.
Who does number 2 work for?
Now we have our important data on our main PC and on the backup server. In order to satisfy numbers 1 and 3, we want our third copy to be hosted elsewhere. There are online cloud services like Backblaze B2 or Amazon Glacier that offer inexpensive long-term storage on their slowest tiers, where you can upload your critical data for very cheap, preferably encrypted to safeguard it from prying eyes, and only incur noticeable charges when you need to download it back.
So now, what exactly is the point of the box?
I use this server for a lot more than just on-site and cloud data backups. I'm running a slew of other services, courtesy of Unraid's extensive app library. I'm self-hosting Image, which is a drop-in replacement for Google Photos. I'm running Omada Controller, which allows me to manage my home network, and Swag Reverse Proxy, which allows me to securely access my various services from anywhere over the internet. I also run a self-hosted instance of Bitwarden Password Manager, which is just like LastPass or 1Password or Keeper, but without the cloud part. I have a bunch of automated downloaders for Linux ISOs. Yeah, that's the ticket. I also run a music service with Navidrome that allows me to stream my own MP3 collection to my devices. I manage all of my smart devices like lights and switches with Home Assistant service that runs on a virtual machine. And finally, I run a Minecraft server for my kids and their friends.
Impressive.
This isn't a lot. In fact, the server is vastly overpowered for what I'm currently doing with it. Look at this, with all the services running, the CPUs are barely doing anything, and the memory utilization, it's not even a third. Even when I start up the resource-intensive Minecraft VM, it still barely breaks 25% CPU and 40% memory utilization. I do plan on doing more with the server in the nearest future. Currently, I have a bunch of wireless UFI cameras installed on the outside and in the common areas of my house, a UFI video doorbell, and a UFI floodlight in my backyard. I'm not really comfortable with my data being in the hands of a third party, no matter how user-friendly they claim to be. I'm planning to soon replace all of the cameras with Ethernet ones and manage them on this server with Blue Iris software.
No! No, and then!
This server is not perfect by any means.
What's the matter? You don't like my house?
The CPUs are very inefficient by today's standards. A modern 16-core 32-thread CPU is over 5 times more powerful at only 2/3 of the power draw. I probably wouldn't even need such a powerful modern CPU. I could make do with fewer cores since each one is much more powerful than cores of my old Xeons. There's a trade-off on price though. Newer CPUs will be more expensive, will require a new motherboard and new memory. Currently, this machine runs DDR3 RAM, which is fairly affordable these days, while new chips need much more expensive DDR4 or DDR5 sticks.
No! God!
You'll notice the distinct lack of a graphics card on this server. Up till now I had no use for one, but that may change soon. The security camera software has plugins that utilize a GPU for AI-related tasks like people and object recognition, and I definitely want to get that working. Unfortunately, my server's power supply does not come with GPU power connectors, so I'd either need to use a graphic card that does not require external power, or MacGyver some sort of a splitter from existing wires. I'll also need more RAM, which could be a problem. As you can see, an entire bank of RAM is empty. It looks like something is wrong with this motherboard because the moment even a single one of these slots is populated, the computer refuses to start up. I did some troubleshooting and ruled out the CPUs as the problem, so it must be something wrong with the socket or another component of the motherboard. The same model of the board costs around $150 on the used market, so I may need to either replace the board or replace the RAM sticks with higher capacity ones. But that is a problem for Dimitri of tomorrow. Screw that guy. Future Dimitri here. Past Dimitri can be such a jerk sometimes. Screw that guy. Finally, since I primarily run used hard drives in this machine, they do tend to fail sooner than their new counterparts would. Every year I find myself replacing a drive or two, and that's not gonna stop.
Stop it!
I usually have a spare disk sitting in my drawer just for this reason, to minimize the time my server is vulnerable. Even though dual parity protects the data from 2 disks failing before I've had a chance to replace them, the longer the server is in that state, the higher the chance of a third drive hitting the bed and taking down the entire system. That's a risk I'm willing to take though, because my most important documents and most precious memories are being encrypted and backed up to Backblaze B2 cloud service on a nightly basis. I lucked out by building the server at a time where prices and demand were low and supply was high. These days, because of the AI bubble, the demand for critical components like memory and storage is insanely high.
Until I got high.
And it's driving up prices for everything like never before. The cost of DDR5 and DDR4 memory literally quadrupled in the last few months of 2025. AI needs lots of storage too, so prices of SSDs have been on the rise recently as well, and even hard drives are getting more expensive. If we try to build a similar server today, it would be very difficult to come under $1,500. We'd need to make some sacrifices, like going with old Xeons again on a platform that uses cheaper DDR3 memory, buying used hard drives, and foregoing nice hot swappable chassis. Let's try anyway.
Do you like to do it yourself?
First, let's settle on a platform and pick a motherboard. I'd stick with the same type of motherboard as my server so that we could use Xeon E5 2600 family of CPUs, since those are super cheap these days. Supermicro X9 DRH7F is a decent board that has a built-in SAS controller supporting 8 drives, plus a bunch of serial ATA connectors for even more drives, albeit at slower transfer speeds. It has 16 DDR3 RAM slots and plenty of PCI Express expansion. In the future, if we wanted to add a GPU or another SAS controller for even more hard drive support, there is plenty of room for that. One thing to note that it's a larger than regular home PC board, sporting an extended ATX form factor. This will narrow down our selection of supported cases, since for the home market they usually support ATX and smaller form factors. Looking at eBay, you can expect to pay at least $150 for this board, plus another $20 or $50 for shipping. The CPUs though are dirt cheap. E5 2690 V2, which is a 10-core 20-thread chip, goes for only around $10, so $20 for a pair. For comparison, when this CPU launched in 2013, its price was $2,000.
Damn good deal.
For cooling the CPUs, we'll need special, narrow kind of coolers, which are more expensive. They're around $25 each, and you'll definitely want to replace the included fans with quieter ones, unless you don't mind your server sounding like a jet. So that's another $20 for the fans. We want at least 64 GB of RAM, preferably the higher speed variant of 1600 MHz. I'd spring for 128 GB to give us some room to host more virtual machines and such. You can expect to pay anywhere from $100 to $110 for 128 GB of memory. Throw in a half-decent power supply and honestly we could stop right there. A naked motherboard sitting on a cardboard box will work just fine if you don't mind the janky look. For the case, I highly recommend the Roswell RSV L4500U model. It's not too large, but it supports 15 3.5-inch hard drives. It's rack mountable and has 4 rack units in height, meaning that it's compatible with expansion cards and power supplies that fit into regular tower PC cases. The case itself is not overly expensive, but the shipping really gets you. So let's say another $150. For a power supply unit, let's not cheap out and pick a well-known brand. That's another $100 or so. For our 2 CPUs, we'll need either a power supply with dual EPS connectors or an EPS splitter. Also, don't forget the hard drive cables. If you plan on using the built-in SAS controller, and you definitely should, you'll need special breakout cables like this one. This cable has a mini SAS connector on one end and 4 SATA connectors on the other end. For SAS drives, you need a different variant of this cable. Each breakout cable goes for around $15. Now let's shop for some storage. Used 6TB SAS drives are currently the sweet spot in terms of price per terabyte. Out of the box, our motherboard supports 8 of those for 40 terabytes total. We should bake in some resiliency and give up one of those drives for parity, giving us flexibility to lose any one drive without impacting the system, but taking down the total capacity to 32 terabytes. On eBay, look for bulk deals, making sure to read seller reviews. $56 per drive sounds good to me. 8 will set us back $450. I'd also recommend getting a high-endurance SSD for the cache pool. A 2TB SSD will run us around $175 plus a corresponding adapter, which is another $30 or so. Let's sum it up. $200 for the motherboard, $20 for 2 CPUs, $120 for memory, $50 for 2 coolers and another $20 for replacement fans, $150 for the case, $100 for the PSU, $30 for the SAS cables. That's $800 for the server components. I'm actually surprised. That's not that much more than what I paid for my server all those years back. We're still way below the cost of a new 8-bay NAS, and we have a much more powerful and, more importantly, much more flexible machine. We spent $450 for 8 6TB drives and $200 for the SSD with an adapter. That's $650 for 32 TB of main storage with 1 drive resiliency and a 2 TB cache pool. For a NAS, you'd be spending a little more on each drive since NASs only support serial ATA. Last thing, the software. Unraid is not free. Their license is a one-time purchase of $110 for a year of updates or $250 for a lifetime of updates. For a new user, I'd recommend starting with the $110 option. Then after the first year, if a new update has something that interests you, you can pay the difference to upgrade the license to the lifetime. Note that once again, I explicitly spec'd out the server without a graphics card. If you have a specific need for one, for example transcoding video in a Plex server or doing AI-related workflows, do some research and then buy whatever fits your budget. The chassis we chose is large enough to accommodate pretty much any GPU. Our grand total for a fully populated server is just under $1,600, give or take. Keep in mind that on second-hand markets, prices fluctuate all the time, and you can usually find even better deals if you're patient. On eBay, don't be afraid to make use of that make offer button if available, and sometimes you can find great deals on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist.
That's all, folks.
Well, that's pretty much all I wanted to show you today. My server is not brag-worthy, but it's also nothing to sneeze at. Thanks for watching. I'm working on more deep dive videos about my other servers and the smart home project, so stay tuned.